what about communion? It's a question about communion in the hand versus communion on the tongue, and there was a thought that maybe the fact that we don't hear about either or is that the hierarchy has suggested that maybe we shouldn't do that. Here's the thing. There's been a lot of changes over the years that happens in the bishops' conference, and they say the proper way to do it is this way, the proper way to do it is that way. They've had back and forth since basically 1970. They've basically gone back and forth. Ultimately, what the answer to that is it depends on the personal choice of the person. The Church has said that we have an option to do either or, and as it stands in the United States, from what I understand at the moment, there's not a preference one over the other. It's basically whichever the person feels comfortable with. Whenever I talk about communion, and as you guys get to know me a little bit more, you'll see I talk about how to properly receive communion, among other things. I always say that we should do what we personally feel called to do. Me personally, before I became a priest, I just received on the tongue for my own reasons, but that was my own preference. I didn't look down on anybody who received it on the hands. As a priest, I would say that if you are going to receive in the hand, make sure you wash your hands first, because sometimes, as you said, soiled hands are something that we should not be receiving Jesus in. Even though we have the potential of receiving communion in the hand, it doesn't mean that we should have a relaxed view of communion. We should not just accept it in our hands, and even if we've just come in from working in the garden or this or that, we should try to have enough respect to have clean hands, to present ourselves with the right intention and the right dispositions, and we should receive communion remembering who it is that we receive. But that also is true for people who receive it on the tongue. The reason I say that is simply this. I don't know how many times I've had my fingers bitten by people who are like snapping at it. I mean, they're not reverently receiving communion, they're like snapping at it and biting me at the same time. Not here, actually. That has not happened here. Don't worry, that was all pre-COVID. But if anybody did lick my fingers, intentionally or accidentally, I have no problem stopping, going to the little table where the hand sanitizer is, and washing it off before I continue to distribute communion to others. So for those that are wondering, oh no, he gives someone communion on the tongue, and I want to receive it in the hand because I'm worried about COVID, don't worry. Because if my finger in any way touched any part of their mouth, I would purify my fingers. That's why we have that little dish there. Purify the fingers so that if there's any fragments of Jesus, it's getting purified in the little dish, and then use the hand sanitizer to make sure there's no germs or anything. And then I would return to give communion out. I can honestly say Father Ken is a germaphobe. You might not believe it, but it's true. I live with him. He will do the same thing. If somebody were to lick his finger when he was putting communion on their tongue, he's going to go purify his fingers and everything before we have the next person in line. But again, there has been nothing that has said that we shouldn't talk about it. There's nothing that says that we should have one preference over the other. The problem is you have these dumb priests who get in the way. I can say that because I am a priest, not one of the dumb priests. I don't have an agenda. I'm not pushing one way or the other. If you've noticed, I don't tell people that they should receive on the tongue or on the hand or while they're kneeling or while they're standing or that they should genuflect before they receive. I don't say anything because ultimately that's between them and God. And as long as they're not creating problems for the people behind them or whatever, there's no problem. Who am I to interfere with the way that they want to receive? Now, if you're doing it in a way that's disrespectful, we'll have words in private. I'm not going to do it in front of everybody. But again, there's been nothing officially that says this or that or that. But it's good to remember that everybody sees communion in a different way. Some people look at it as a very intimate moment. Some people look at it as, something extremely formal, extremely, like if you even take a deep breath, you might offend Jesus. I know some people that that haven't received communion in a long time because they believe that they need to go to confession the same day that they receive communion, so that there's no possibility that they've committed a sin before they receive the Blessed Sacrament. I don't say that they're wrong. I say that everybody receives it and approaches the Blessed Sacrament in their own way according to their conscience, and I have to leave it at that, because again, it's not my role to judge. It's not my role to look at everybody and say, well, I know that you're doing something sinful. Have you gone to confession before you're receiving communion? Or I know that you're living in sin, or whatever. It's not my place. Because remember, they're the ones that will be judged, not me. They're the ones that have to know if their conscience is clear or not. And if they have gone to confession and have not committed any sin, even though we might think they're guilty of sin, only God knows that for sure. And if we're judging them based on what we think we know, God will remind us of that at our own judgment. That's why it's better to have blinders on when it comes to that and receive it without looking at what everybody else is worrying about, without looking at who's receiving or who's not receiving, because honestly, it's none of my business. Just like with confession, when I'm hearing confessions, I don't care who's confessing. I don't try to pay attention to who it is and see if I recognize the voice or try to remember what they confess, because honestly, I don't care. It's not my forgiveness anyway. It's Jesus' forgiveness. And besides, I don't even remember what everybody confesses. I've had people say to me, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been, a week or 2 weeks since my last confession, and it's basically the same as last week. I'm like, okay, that's great, but I don't know who you are. I don't know what you said. Remind me what you said last week. Because I don't remember, nor do I care to remember. If I had to remember everybody's sins, honestly speaking, I would have nothing else in my life to do but trying to remember How am I supposed, and why would I care? I have my own sins to worry about, much less everybody else's. I'm just the instrument by which that mercy is extended to other people. It's not my place to, let me keep a note of that. That person did. Most of the people in the world today are posting their whole lives on social media anyway. So I don't even have to listen to their confession. I already saw it on Facebook. It's you almost tempted to say to someone, did you forget something? Oh, what, Father? I don't know, that drunken party that you had yesterday. It was all over Facebook. I would never do that. I'm just teasing, but you understand what I'm saying. So, next question.